Hello everyone, so on this day we're testing out a new bread pan I bought in TK Maxx, but it's originally from, what's it called, Smith Clark Ironworks, and it's a cast iron loaf pan. With like a skeleton in it, and it's in the shape of a coffin. It's really cool, great for Halloween. So we're testing it out on this day, and I'm super excited to show you the results and some ideas I have to do with it in the future, and it's a super fun buy. I think you can still get them on their website, Smith Clark Ironworks, um, and they have some other really cool things. Like I saw they have a cauldron as well, a cast iron cauldron that looks incredible and so cool. So super fun. So anyway, I'm starting off with 100 grams of milk warmed, and then I'm adding to that 35 grams of sugar and 12 grams of yeast, active dried, um, yeah, active dried yeast, yep. And then I'm also going to make the psyllium husk up as well, which I'm doing 16 grams of psyllium husk, blonde psyllium husk whole, with 145 grams of milk. I'm using almond milk. And this whole recipe, by the way, is gluten-free and dairy-free as well. But you can just make it to your preferences. If you're making a different bread to go into this, then probably use a different recipe. This is a gluten-free recipe. So there's quite a few adaptations that you wouldn't have in a normal recipe. And this is my super soft gluten-free bread, and it stays soft multiple days. It's really great, so I definitely recommend it. So yeah, here I'm adding in my yeast. Make sure you check the ingredients on your yeast. Check it's gluten-free. Anyway, once I get the yeast into the milk and it's nice and warm, I'm just going to stir that up. And we've got sugar in there to feed the yeast, and then I'll just pop it somewhere warm and let that rise whilst we get on with the rest of the recipe. So setting that aside, I'm going to cover it with the cling film and set that aside. And then we'll get on to making the psyllium husk mixture. So that's the milk that I've already measured out. So 145 grams of milk, almond milk, mixed with 16 grams of the blonde whole psyllium husk. You can get that on Amazon. I haven't found it anywhere else really but Amazon and some other online places. And this is just what makes um, the bread kind of malleable like a glutened bread. And I use the blonde just because then it doesn't turn my bread purple, which the other one has a tendency to sometimes do. And it comes whole. You can blend up if you want a powder form instead. Anyway, mixing that through. That will turn into a gel once it's combined properly and left for a few minutes. And to that, we're going to add the rest of our wet ingredients. So I have oil as well, so I'm going to add. I'm actually starting off with some apple cider vinegar. I add a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. I do that because that can make the more acidic environment aids the yeast development, and I like quite big, airy loaves. Then I add some oil. This is sunflower oil, I believe, or vegetable. I'm pretty sure it's sunflower. And I'm going to add 55 grams of the oil. You can use whatever oil you want, really. Olive oil would give it a more rich taste, especially if you use extra virgin, but obviously it's more expensive, so use whatever oil you want. My oil thing, whatever container, I accidentally spilled oil on it, so it was really slippy. So that's what I was doing, was wiping it off to try and not drop the whole container of oil. At least buy the big ones because they're cheaper. I tend to buy this isn't that one, it's a different one, but I tend to buy the sunflower one, I can't remember the brand name. I can't think of the name, but I tend to get that one. Anyway, and then I just need to add 1 egg white to this bowl, and that's all the wet ingredients in one place. I like to just add all the wet ingredients into one bowl. You could just do the psyllium and then add the wet ingredients in slowly once you're mixing, but I like to do it this way because then I just have kind of 3 key steps: the yeast, then the wets, and then the dry, and then I add them all together. I just find that easiest. Anyway, once that's all set up, I just put that aside, and then we'll do the dries ingredients. So for the dry ingredients, we're going to start with 110 grams of tapioca starch. I buy this on Amazon too, as well as my potato starch on Amazon. So we need 90 grams potato starch. I use starches because they're lighter, and it makes the bread fluffier and more like a gluten bread. And I use this ratio because otherwise it can taste strange. I don't know why, but this is the one that I found works for me. And then I do 80 grams of corn starch, which I just find the supermarket. I can get that readily available in supermarkets, but I can't for the potato starch or the tapioca starch. And I'm clearly running out of the cornstarch on this day. Anyway, once that's all added, you can add your xanthan gum and baking powder. You don't have to add xanthan gum. I know some people have problems with it, but it binds it more like a gluten bread. Otherwise, it won't really bind very well. I'm just topping out the rest of the corn flour or cornstarch, and then I'm going to add the other ingredients. So I tend to do 2 level teaspoons of xanthan gum and 2 teaspoons of baking powder as well to give it an extra rise and oomph. So anyway, once that's all done, I add the salt later rather than adding it now. So you could add your salt to your dry ingredients now, but if you do that, salt apparently can inhibit yeast, and we don't want to inhibit our yeast, so I add the salt after I mix the yeast through. You can see that I'm not using a spoon here measuring these. I just can't be bothered to get a spoon out, so I'm just winging it, but you should probably use a spoon and not wing it because it can go very wrong. Anyway, so now I'm grabbing the yeast mixture, which should be nice and frothy now. There you go, you can see it's frothed up a bit. The house is quite cool on this day, so it's not frothed up a crazy amount, but it has frothed up enough. So I get the yeast in first to the flour, and then mix that through, and then I add the rest of the ingredients. You really want to try and scrape out all your yeast so that you're getting all the rise you can. And I've got my KitchenAid all set up, so I'm just going to get this into my KitchenAid with the dough hook on and mix that through. I do really want to purchase the stainless steel attachments for my KitchenAid because I've found that my some of the coating's starting to come off on some of, especially the dough hook, because I use that all the time. I feel like I'm always making bread or something with the dough hook, so I could do with the stainless steel attachments. Anyway, I'm just going to mix that through. You don't need to mix it through too much, just to where it's kind of mixed through with all the flour, so that when you add the rest of the ingredients, the yeast is evenly distributed. So I get that turned off, and then we're going to add our wet ingredients that we put in our wet bowl. I've got just that here. And now you'll be able to see that the psyllium husk is formed into a gel, so we have to kind of scrape that out. Psyllium husk is actually meant to be pretty good for you. It's meant to be an easily digestible fiber, I believe. I don't know, don't quote me on it. I'm not sure, but I've heard that it's meant to be quite good for you, and that some people just take it straight. You can see the flakes of, or like the flecks of the psyllium husk. You can't really tell texture-wise, but you can kind of see it throughout the bread. If you don't want that, then you need to blend it up into a powder before you add it. And now I'm adding the salt so that it hopefully doesn't inhibit our yeast. But I have made a mistake in doing this method of adding the salt later and forgotten to add it, and that's really not good. So if you're not sure you'll remember it, you could just add it in with the dry ingredients. I don't think it would really make a difference. Anyway, I'll speed the mixing process. So now you can see our dough is nice and looking stretchy and nice. However you want to describe it. And you want it to kind of pull away from the sides a little bit. That also still be quite wet. Gluten-free dough has to be a higher hydration. What's the reason? I know there's a reason. I can't think of the reason right now. So that I don't know. Google it. I'm not sure, but I know it has to be a higher hydration. I've done a lot of research into gluten-free bread, but honestly, I feel like my recipe is kind of really great now, and I don't really do much research into it anymore. I just kind of make the same recipes pretty much over and over. I'm just lining my cast iron bread pan now, the COFFIN one. I'll move the KitchenAid out of the way in a second so you can see it. And I'm lining that with some just parchment paper, baking paper. Mostly I'm lining it because I don't want to have to kind of scrape it when I'm washing it, the cast iron. I'd rather it was kind of protected. Because I'm not super familiar with washing cast iron, so I like to just be able to gently wash it, because I know that it can be quite touchy and that you have to like re-season it and stuff, and I don't want to do that, so I'm trying to just cast iron it. But I also add some oil around the edges of it. I add oil to the baking paper as well, and then we'll add it in the bread. Anyway, I'm moving the KitchenAid out of the way now. So you can see we've got our olive pan oiled up. And I like my hands to be pretty oily when I'm working with this dough so that it doesn't stick to my hands. So just pull it off the extra dough from the dough hook, and then get it all out of the pan, out of the bowl even, and try to get it into the pan. I'm just adding a bit more oil to my hands there. It's quite sticky because I don't have much oil on my hands. But it doesn't need to be perfect because I'm just kind of flattening it in there. It's not like when I'm normally making it in the Dutch oven and it needs to be in a ball. It's just kind of forming it into a ball in the bowl, and then I'm just gonna kind of flatten it into place in this pan. Trying to make sure that it's kind of evenly distributed, not super thick in the middle. And obviously it's a strange shape, the coffin shape, it's kind of tapered in at the edges. So I'm trying to push it into those edges a little bit. And I'm getting it in here before it's risen rather than after, because otherwise I think I'd be squishing all the air out of it and it would not rise very well. It rose quite well doing it this way. So anyway, then I'm going to just score it with my scorer. You can just use a knife, and I'm adding some flour to the top. So this is just gluten-free bread flour by Dove's Farm that I'm adding to the top. And then I'm going to score on top of that. And at first I wasn't sure what to score, but in the end I decided on doing kind of 3 X's. But you could score like a whole person if you wanted, if you were really good at it. I'm not, but if you are. And that's perfect. So then I'm just going to wrap that up so it can rise. So I'm wrapping it up with cling film. You can't really see, but this bread's taken up about halfway up the bread pan, so we're looking for it to rise kind of to the top of the bread pan, for it to double in size. And I'm just going to set that on the side for about an hour and a half. I'm just kind of covering it up, and then I can just add this big lid that we've got, which has a skeleton in it, to the top. So you'll be able to see that a bit better in a minute. But anyway, there's our coffin pan for now. And I'm just going to clean up and let that rise. I'll just show you a shot of the recipe ingredients as well from my recipe book in case you want to jot them down. So that's my recipe book. And you can see I have it in 3 steps, which I find easiest. Here's the bread after it's risen for about an hour, so you can see that it's pretty high up. And so before we get it into the oven, we need to take the cling film off it, and that's the skeleton lid that you can see. So it has a skeleton imprinted on it. See, it's risen nicely. So I'm going to cook it covered for about 15 minutes and then uncovered for about 15. It's still a little bit damp from where I just washed it out, because I washed it out before I cooked in it because it was brand new. Obviously without the baking paper it'd look a lot cooler, but I'm just trying to protect the pan. So I'm just going to get that in the oven now. 15 minutes covered, 15 uncovered. And that's just the cool lid. And this is my first time doing this, so I was interested, will it imprint, won't it? Have I got the right amount of batter or dough in there? So in the oven it goes at 180 degrees Celsius. And this is it when I took the lid off, so you can see it's kind of risen just above where the lid is. So it hasn't fully got that skeleton imprinting because it wasn't quite enough. But it still came out a delicious loaf. It was hollow when I tapped on the bottom. And here's me cutting it into it. So if you did want it to have the imprint, I would add maybe like just a quarter more. So I do 1 1/4 of the recipe maybe. And you can see how soft it is inside. So I'm cutting it up to make pesto sandwiches with. Again, just like how soft it is, it's really so great, this bread. And I'm just using some red pesto, some mayo, and making it into sandwiches on this night. And we have some chicken, some pre-cooked chicken that I chuck in with I think some of the tomatoes from the garden and some spinach, and it turns out really good. Oh, and some pre-cooked bacon as well. Really wonderful dinner. The golden sunrise tomatoes are my absolute favourite from the garden. And then I'm just going to add the top to it. And again, you can see how soft it is, how delicious it is. And there's our sandwiches for dinner. It'd be great if you had some chips with it as well. These were really filling, by the way. So thank you for watching, and I hope you give it a try. And if you do, let me know how it goes. Bye!